Thank you everybody for taking the time this morning. I'm gonna reshare my screen here with 365 all loaded up. I apologize in advance. The spring pollen and weather have gotten to me, so if I put myself on mute just out of the blue, I'm probably sneezing, and I don't want to sneeze into the microphone, so I apologize about that. Well, I guess guys can't respond. You should be able to see my screen, and we'll get started with this in a second, starting on all purchase orders. First and foremost, thanks for your patience, over the first 4 months or so. Obviously we've had a little hiccups here or there, so we appreciate everyone's patience as we've worked through it. We're getting to a point where, we're hoping that everything is stabilized. We're going to start to be able to make some changes and take some time and kind of go over some features of D365 that maybe we didn't cover in the initial training. Today, we're going to look at kind of personalizations again in ways that we might be able to help users improve what they're seeing in their views and ultimately become more efficient in the way that you're working within the application. Cheryl sent out the agenda, and at the top of the agenda, it says using the new list grid. So probably about 6 weeks or so ago, we moved to a new release of D365, which users would not have really noticed a change. But one change that did kind of slide in there quietly is called this enhanced grid view or this list grid. And it's going to make personalization just a lot easier. And it was already a little more simple than DAX 2012. So this is just we're gonna review that. We're gonna review how we can really work with some of the data within 365 and hopefully make your guys' jobs a little easier. One of the very first things, or a couple of things we want to cover, is how do we add columns? How do we remove columns? How do we rearrange columns? So really kind of get some of the information in there that we want and get rid of some of the information we don't want. Some of the most common screens that I think we look at as users, are all purchase orders, all vendors, invoicing, and potentially, your invoice journal. So what I've done is I've pulled up all purchase orders here, and this is our standard view. I'm not going to cover how we save this right now, but if you can see my cursor in the upper left-hand corner, it says all purchase orders in standard view. If you see the standard view, that is what the default view is for any page that you land on. And I'll kind of refer back to this upper left-hand corner throughout the hour. So just know that that's there and we're on our standard view. I'm going to jump out of order a little bit here, and I'm going to talk about how we can remove or we can hide some of these columns that we have in our view, because they may not be important when we're just trying to search through purchase orders or quickly get information. The very first one that I'm going to look at when I'm kind of taking a look at this standard view is vendor account and invoice account are not always the same, but in the vast majority of cases, they are. So for me personally, I'm going to take out the invoice account. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to hover over this header tag or column label, and I'm going to right click. And when I right click, it brings up this sub menu. We're going to work out of this menu quite a bit, as you can see, for some of the different features we're going to cover. But for this one, I'm just going to hide the column. The column's not gone. We're going to cover how we insert a column. So if at some point down the line you decide that you want to put that column back in, that's not a problem. We're just going to add it the same way as we insert columns here in a minute. Just going through these and looking at it pretty quickly. Just me personally, again, I hide currency because everything we do is in US dollars. I also hide the delivery date in this column. or in this view, and I hide mode of delivery. Oops. And delivery terms. Purchase agreement, since it doesn't have the number, it's just a check. I will hide that as well. And then direct delivery, I'll hide. So what I've done is I've basically cleaned up my all purchase order views, and I've gotten it down to pretty much just, what I thought was the most relevant information. When I've done that, if we look back up at our upper left-hand corner, now it says standard view, and it's got an asterisk. What that asterisk means is that I've done some sort of personalization on this page or on this view. If I leave this page and I don't save my personalization, it won't keep it for the next time that I come back to this page. It'll all be erased and we'll see that whole standard view that we saw at the very beginning. So just keep that in mind. Anytime you see an asterisk, you've done a personalization on the page, and it needs to be saved if you want to keep it. We'll cover saving here in a minute. Now that I've hidden or removed all of those columns that aren't important to me, I want to add some back in. I talked about the new list grid features that we have. If you look over to the right side of my screen, you see these three vertical dots. These weren't here at Go Live. They showed up again with our release of the new version we're on. That was about 6 weeks ago. But if you just click on this, you'll see there's two features, insert columns and show footer. We'll cover show footer in a second, but we just click insert columns. And it's going to bring up a number of fields or columns that we can add back to our all purchase order view. I personally just like to sort A to Z for this. The reason is you'll see there are some duplicates throughout, so it helps you choose the right one. Sometimes it's just you're going to have a trial and error. You might have to load a couple of the different ones to see which one the data is actually populated. For the all purchase orders, really the two primary fields that we get requested to add are going to be orderer and requester. And adding these two and what they're going to allow you to do is ultimately search the all purchase order view better for yourself or for an employee, a coworker, anyone who may have had a hand in creating this purchase order or this document. Of note, any catalog order that you place, external catalog order that you place that starts with a purchase requisition, you're going to see auditor administrator as the order. Less than 1% of purchase requisitions can get stuck in workflow. I actively monitor it. So for those that I resume workflow on, you may see my name. If you create that purchase requisition, you're going to be requester. And then again, auditor administrator will be the order. If you create the purchase requisition and it's not an external catalog order, you may be the orderer. Also, procurement may show up here. So requester may be the more reliable one to filter on. But to get both or all of your purchase orders, you will have to search individually on either one of these. Those are probably the two most important fields that we get asked about or that can be useful to add for all purchase orders. The other ones that you could put in here, project ID if you work with grants or you work with capital. Also, purchase order description or PO description. If you populate that field when you're creating your purchase order or purchase requisition, that can also help you identify purchase orders by, a specific project name. Also, Cheryl made a good point here, and I don't have it in here. Accounting dates can also be added in here. I have that in my view. I don't have that didn't add those in here now. So we can come back in. The ones that you've added, if you've added columns, when you come back to insert additional columns, the ones that you've added will show up at the very top. If you want to remove those, you can deselect them and they'll remove them or hide them from your view. I'm going to jump a little bit out of order again because I'm going to jump off this page and I want to show kind of how, or we'll move a couple of these columns around here in a sec. But so I've added some columns. I know I want to keep these columns. I may want to rearrange how they are, but I don't want to lose where I'm at now. To save this personalization, I'm going to come up here and I learned that this is called a chevron arrow or a down arrow. I learned that a couple days ago, but click the down arrow and what you'll bring up is if you have never saved or never personalized, all you'll see is standard view and you'll have to save as. You won't have the option to save because you can't save over your standard view. So I'm going to save as something new. What it will default as is my view. That's fine if you want to keep it named that. You can also name it whatever you would choose or however you'd like. If you do not toggle pin as default view to yes, when you come back in, you won't see your view even though you've saved it. You would have to select your view. So it's likely that you want to always pin this as your default view. So that way, when you come back to the view that you're in, your changes are going to show up without having to load that view. Once you save that view, it'll change from standard view to whatever you've named it to. In this case, it's my view, and that asterisk will go away. So now we'll keep working in here for a second. Maybe you want to move some of your columns around, for instance. So if we want to rearrange or we want to move columns, there are a couple different ways that we can do it, but the list grid has made it very easy. If we come up to this column header label, you can see there's, or hopefully you can see there's these all. Try to make it as big as I can for you guys there. There's these four dots there, these like a square of four dots. If you hover over this square of four dots, you'll get the kind of that move icon. And then if you click and drag, you can drag to wherever you want to drop it. It's that simple. When you drag it and you saw that I dropped it in there, I got the asterisk again because I made another personalization. Now that I've saved this view, I can simply click the down arrow and click save, and my asterisk goes away. My purchase order status where I moved it to is now kept in that new position. So that the list grid has made it very easy for us to just move columns. When we went live, this was not the case. Because the list grid has made it so easy, I'm not going to show the other ways to move columns. This is the easiest, the quickest, the fastest. Just make sure that you save it if you want to save it when you see that asterisk. All right, so I'm going to switch views. I'm going to come over here to our outstanding encumbrances. And we're going to work, I'm going to jump back and forth between a few documents. Unfortunately, the feature I'm going to show you guys here, I've got a big screen, so I don't have to scroll side to side quite as much. But one of the other new features of this list grid that we have is if we come up here, so I ran an outstanding encumbrance report. I'm in my standard view. And I, just ran my outstanding encumbrance report. And I'm gonna look through here as separated by segments and separate columns, so I can go through and filter how I want to filter, get to my specific budget that I'm looking for, my specific fund that I'm looking into. But I don't want to lose the document number. So now we can freeze columns. It's not going to let me freeze this one. Okay, I apologize. You can't do that in outstanding encumbrances. I was trying to find one that has a lot. So let's go back to purchase order. I'm going to drag these out, so I do have to scroll. So if I right click up here in the purchase order, I can freeze my column. When I freeze my column here, you see it might have changed just a slight bit. That column is always going to stay when I go over to the right. So I apologize, my example that I wanted to use in outstanding encumbrances, it's not possible in there, most likely because it's a report inquiry. But this is a useful tool, especially if you're working on a monitor or you're kind of cramped down and you want to make sure that you're holding that. It doesn't have to be this first column. So I can unfreeze the same way that I froze. So this is frozen. If I want to unfreeze it, I right click and I click unfreeze. Maybe I want to freeze by vendor name. If I freeze that column, it's going to throw it all the way over to the left. So it brings that over to the first column now, and it's going to freeze my vendor name. So then I could search by, city electric company if I wanted to, or I could search from A to Z, but it's always going to hold that vendor name or whichever column you freeze by. You can also freeze multiple columns. So you don't have to just freeze one column. If you want to freeze, like I've done here, now I have a purchase order and I can search for ones that maybe have been, confirmed or are only in review. So I want to see which ones maybe still need action on them. So I think, I don't want to get confused on the feature. I think you can only do 2 freezes at once. Freezing a column is a personalization. So you can see in my all purchase orders, I do have that asterisk up there. So if you do want to save your frozen column, save it. Otherwise, when you get out and you come back, it won't be in the view that you had been working in. So freezing and unfreezing columns, those are a personalization for a view that you're in. Okay, now we're going to come back to outstanding encumbrances, and then we're also going to work a little bit in budget analysis. So another feature of the list grid is the ability to group based on one of the columns or fields that you have available to you. For outstanding encumbrances, when you run an outstanding encumbrance report, it's running it at the line level. So if you have a purchase order that might have, let's say 10 open lines, you're going to see that purchase order, that document number, 10 times with each line and each line of information that's available. That was always a little frustrating to me because I just wanted to see the PO and the total. Now I can group by this column. So same way, coming up to this header, the column headers and the labels, and right clicking in here, it's get used to that because that is how you're going to get to do a lot of the features in the views where you're at. So if I group by this column, these first couple ones that I see here aren't going to have a whole lot of documents in them, just one a piece. But as you get down there, you can start to see you get a document count. So there's 3 lines in ACDI, 00143. And we keep going down and you can see there's ones, that have multiple lines. That alone may not be that powerful of itself, but you can group by that. You can group by multiple columns. So in here, it may not make too much sense to group by more than one column if I'm doing it by document type. But if you're trying to group by one of your budgeting segments here, so if you're wanting to group by a division and then a fund or a specific sub-fund project, whatever it may be, you can group by multiple columns. I think you can group up to 5 columns, and then that's where it will stop you, and you can't create any more subgroups from there. Grouping can be saved as part of a personalization, so you can save it, and then you can come back and it will be there. I cannot save it here in outstanding encumbrances, it looks like. And again, I would say that's going to be because this is a report and inquiry and not like a all purchase orders view. Same exact way that you freeze and unfreeze. If you decide that you don't want to group, you don't want to group by this row. So that's my group by headers for each one of my groups. You come back to document number, you select ungroup, and it takes it all away. And you can put it back. It's almost like a pivot table in Excel. You can expand and collapse by using the chevron arrow or this drop down arrow. So you can click and expand and drop if you want to tidy up your views. Now, this alone isn't all that powerful, but the other part of hitting on these vertical dots over here, we have our footers shown already. So if I didn't have my footers shown and I clicked on the vertical dots, the 3 vertical dots, it would say show footer. So I already have my footers down here. And if you come over here to the far left, you'll see that it has our total and it says calculate. So if I click my calculate button, it's going to start to tell me all of the outstanding encumbrances that I have. And I probably should have filtered before I did this because this is going for the entire city now. But it does look like it's working relatively quickly. We are going to filter. So I'm going to filter by Recon Parks 51. And then I'll also do a capital. So we're trying to identify any open encumbrances that we can close out, return money to the budget. So now you can see I've already I hit calculate already. So now it's telling me that I have 383 rows, which in and of itself isn't all that important information. But if I come over here to my budget, you can see that it's totaled for me. So I can see all of my outstanding encumbrances for this fund, what the original was, what it currently is, what I have remaining. But then you can also see that on all these header lines, I can see the individual ones themselves as well. So if I come down to a document that has multiple lines, 6 lines, and I come over, I can see the totals for those specific groupings that I've made. So there's a lot of different use cases in there that I think, or I'll be interested to hear from users, is how you guys can leverage this and how you can work with groups off. So Darlene asked if an export will hold the group totals. Darlene, that is a great question, and unfortunately the answer is no, it does not. If you filter on the header, that export will hold. So the 383 rows that I export, because I filtered on Recon Parks and on Fund 7702, it holds those filters. It doesn't hold the groupings, unfortunately. That, once we get it in Excel, would need a pivot table. So hopefully, maybe further functionality from Microsoft, that would be something that we can do. So you have the footer in here. Let's see here. So I had the footer. If I wanted to show the footer, I came in here and I would click Show Footer. Obviously, now that I have the footer, if I'm done using it, and you do see it takes up a little bit of screen real estate. So if I'm done using it, I want to get rid of it, you can hide the footer just the same. Show footer, you put it back. Since I've already calculated on here, it just performs the calculation again. Rolled through some of this. So exporting rows to Excel. So far up to this point, we've advised users if you want to export something to Excel, you can come up here and there's the Open in Microsoft Excel. You click next to the paperclip and you have an export to Excel. You're still welcome to use it that way. Now you can just come down here though, and again, you can just right click and you can export all rows. If I come over here and I grab a couple rows, guys, let me ungroup. I guess in this, I can't grab specific rows again because this is a report. So even if I can do this in my group, if I group it again, I'll show you in all purchase orders as well. But if I want to export this, I can just right click in the header. I can right click in the row. You have to be on a specific row, but I can just right click in any row or header, export all rows. You get to the same exact place, and then you can export and open up Excel that way. A little bit easier, you're still free to use up here next to the paperclip and just click on Open in Microsoft Office, but a right click on the column header, a right click on a row, that'll get you to be able to export as well. If I come back here to all purchase orders, right, I click, it's going to open one. No. If I click the first 5 or 6 or 7, and then I click in here, so now you can see it says export all rows. I can also export marked rows. Okay, so there is the ability to export just what you've selected when you have the ability to just select lines. Since we're here and we've talked about this before, we talk about fields and then some of the just some of the common issues that have come up. I did want to cover, if I can get to it. Okay, so here I am in an invoice. Oh, here I am in the standard view of an invoice journal. So you can get to invoice journal a number of different ways. Generally, how I operated myself personally when I would be checking on an invoice is I went through the purchase order. That's not how you get to the invoice, have to get to the invoice journal. There's probably some folks shaking their head at me and saying that's not an efficient way. However, you get to access and work with the invoice journal, a common question or inquiry that has come up is how can I tell if a warrant has been written or issued rather, and has it been mailed out? So I just wanted to cover this quickly, and let me find in my notes where it is. The two fields that you can add that can help you identify kind of where a warrant is in the process as you're going through. Okay, so in here, there's a lot of information that may or may not be helpful. That's for you to decide, what you may or may not want to keep. I'm probably going to hide a bunch of these just so I can get the two columns that I would like you to see in here. And I will put together a small job aid that will really just reference these two fields and the invoice journal and why we're adding them as far as being able to see some of this information on a specific invoice warrant. So I'm in here now. I've cleaned it up by hiding the columns that we went over earlier. Now I'm going to insert columns. So I hit my three vertical dots to the far right, bring up my fields. Personal preference of mine, I sort A to Z. That way I can see any duplicates that may be showing up here. The two fields that I want to add are going to be last settlement and payment reference. So last settlement and payment reference. Now that I've added those, over here you're going to see, and this is good to see this, when we're in all purchase orders, my view is bold and it's big and you can see the asterisk. When we come over to outstanding encumbrances, it changes a little bit and it's a little bit smaller and it's maybe not in exactly the same position. But when we get to invoice journal, it's just very small, non-bold text up in the upper left corner, but it does say standard view, and there is now an asterisk because I've added these two fields. So make sure you're always looking. It may not be bold, invoice journal has taken its spot, but standard view is here. I have made changes and I now have an asterisk there. So I have to save this. Click the down arrow. It's the same process that we saw in all purchase orders. Okay, while we're waiting to save this view, there it is. So we're going to save as my view. I'm going to pin this as my default. So when I come back into Invoice Journal, I'm going to see the two fields that I've added. I'm not going to see the fields that I've hidden. So what I just added here is payment reference and last settlement. What payment reference is the warrant number. What the last settlement is the day that it was that it was actually printed. So those are two important fields that we can add. I want to look. I don't think it's there. In fact, I'm almost 100% sure. So clear date is not here. I'm going to go slightly off script here, and I'm going to show one more thing. So we have the check number that was written. We have the date that it was printed, or the warrant number, the date it was printed. So we can go one step forward if we highlight one of these invoices. And if we click transactions, and we click paid by checks, and we click checks one more time, you see the cleared date here. The cleared date is actually the date that this warrant was put in the bank account of the vendor. So we know that it has been deposited into their account. They have taken the money from us and they now have it. So those are the three, the three pieces of information that you can look for if you're trying to follow if your invoice has been paid and the warrant as it's going through the system. Okay, I'm going to jump back and get on track there. I will try to put a small job aid together that highlights those three pieces of information. That will that should be useful to anyone for accounts payable. Just making sure that we have covered everything here. Okay. So that covers the list grid really for at a high, quick overview. I would encourage you to play around with this. I'm not going to say you can't break stuff, but when you're just trying to do personalization, you're never going to get rid of something we can't help you get back. You know, we're always going to be able to get your view back to what it was prior to and help you out. So I would encourage you to play around with your personalization with the list grid. We can always help you get back to your standard view. Um, you know, we can always try to find the fields that you would like to have added and get those added for you. I can tell you that you're not going to find every single, you know, data field that you would like or column that you would like to add. They're not all in there, but I would say that the vast majority are. And I really think that with a little bit of playing around, you'll be able to personalize your views to really fit your jobs. But that's the list grid side of it. They've made it really easy. It's the three vertical dots to the right side of the screen here. Right click, you insert call. I'm sorry, you left click on the just a normal mouse click on these three to insert columns or to show your footer. In the header itself, in these column labels, you can right click, and that's going to give you the more expanded capabilities. Remember that you highlight the four dots in a square pattern, and you click and drag to move and to rearrange. And then always make sure that if you make a change, so we're going to make a change here. I'm going to drag something real quick. You get that asterisk, you have to save it, or you're not going to have that change when you come back to see it again. Now, I will say something. If you filter, so let me go to a different view. So I'm in a different view. I'm going to come back to the standard view. So if I'm in a standard view, and let's say I search for, I don't think I have any invoices, so I'll search for my old invoices. So I have effectively filtered on a column, and it's not going to do it in here, but it will do it in all purchase orders. So I'll come back to all purchase orders. If you filter on columns, so let's say I want to search for all purchase orders in the 270. That is a personalization, okay? So if you filter on a column and then you save this, you're only going to see purchase orders that had PO 270. If you enter something in your filter box, that is a personalization. So be very careful of that. Don't save without making sure that you haven't filtered on a column header, that you don't have something in your filter box. If you save, you're saving those. Those are personalizations. You can tell that you have filtered on one of these header boxes because you'll see the little filter, the little funnel next to purchase order. That will show up next to any header or column in the header that you filtered on. So that's something to be careful of. Make sure that you clear these out before you would save any views. Make sure that you don't save when you have filters.
And Kyle, this is Cheryl. A couple quick questions. We had a question about how to determine when an ACH payment has been made. Can you just verify that that would then just be looking at that last settlement date?
That is a good question, and I on the spot will do not definitively know the answer to that question. Michelle says yes. So if an ACH payment has been made, that settlement date is going to be when that transaction has occurred. Thank you, Michelle.
Great. And then we have another question. It says, I believe we saw this earlier in the presentation, but just to confirm, invoice and contracts can now be viewed by multiple suffix lines individually without having to drill down into the PO. This is from Justin. Justin, I'm not sure if maybe you were referring to the outstanding encumbrance or the invoice journal. Let's see if I can find you here. I'm going to unmute you. Or try to unmute you. There we
Hello.
go. Justin, can you? Hi, Justin.
Good morning. Yeah, I don't remember what screen it was on. I just remember earlier we were filtering around and moving things, and it seemed like we were able to see the suffix lines for purchase orders in one spot and, on the screen from the, without having to drill in and go into a particular PO.
Yeah.
It seems previously I would always have to find the purchase order, then drill down into the purchase order to be able to see the activity related to that specific line.
Yeah, and Justin, I think the view that we were in was that outstanding encumbrance summary. And so that is just that's run at the line level, because, if you have, or a user has, let's say you have 4 lines on a purchase order and 2 of them have been fully exhausted. When you run that open encumbrance report, those lines aren't going to show up. Just, let's say lines 10 and 20 have been exhausted. They won't show up on that report, just lines 30 and 40. And it's also possible a user could cancel a line. So that report specifically is run at the line level, and that's why you were seeing that level of detail.
Okay.
Thank you, Justin. And then Kyle, just a quick time check for you. We're at 10:45. And are you going to be showing today how to do a little bit of customization on the header and line level still? Or
Yes, that's what I was just about to. I was going to pull up, and I wanted to show. I want to show it in an invoice, actually. At least
Perfect.
one of the.
All right. Well, I'm going to mute myself again then. It's all you. Thank you.
So yeah, I apologize. We might be running a slight bit. Nope. We'll try to work through it. So in addition to adding in, and what Cheryl is referring to here is, in addition to adding in these headers in these all purchase order views, right? You can actually add data fields that are useful in specific, purchase order views, invoice views, different views that you have. So I want to show something that it's maybe slightly imperfect at the moment, but extremely helpful as well. So when you're in a vendor invoice, again, here you'll notice this is not a bold, but it is my view, or a standard view, right? So if I'm back in this standard invoice view, not as big of a deal today as it was 3 years ago when it was DAX, or even a year and a half ago when it was DAX. But if you're paying an invoice, you have to switch to the header level and click on address and then change the remittance location. In DAX, this was terrible. In D365, it's a little inconvenient just because of the amount of clicks that you have to take. If you want to add a field, you can do it here at the header view. You can potentially do it down here in the line view as well. So there's different fields can go different places. Oftentimes what you can add here in this vendor invoice header view, it's going to be a subset of the fields that are available to you here in your actual header view. Okay, so it's not every field. There's 2 ways that you can do this. If I'm in my vendor invoice header, I find some white space, meaning not a data field, and I right click. And when I right click, I click on Personalize Vendor Invoice Header. It's going to highlight the area, and it's going to give me some options. I can add a field, I can personalize the page. So that is one way to get to this point. If you just want to add the field, that's all you want to do is simply add a field, go ahead and click add a field. The field I'm trying to add for you guys or show you how to add is remittance location. If we add that, we have the ability to change the remittance address. So now remittance location shows up here. Unfortunately, the address does not display. Maybe no promises, but hopefully down the road, we might be able to get the address to populate in here. Not entirely sure. But you have the ability to click on it and change the remit address. So no more going to the header, no more having to click the address fast tab. You can do it right here from the vendor invoice header. Adding this data field is a personalization that changes the standard view. You'll get the asterisk. If you do not save it, it won't be there the next time you come and look for it. I am going to very quickly cover how you can move this around. This is the same whether you're doing it in the vendor invoice header or you're doing it down here in line details. The steps are the same, so I'm going to just show here for time. The other way that you can get to this point is if you come up to your top ribbon and you select options. You come over anytime you select options on any view that you're in that has options, the far left is always going to be personalize, and you can click personalize this page. This is the old way to do all of the personalization before list grid came in. I don't necessarily recommend working this way, but it's option as well. If you've been working it this way, you can still work in here this way. If you want to add a field, you click add a field, but now you have to come back down and you have to click in and select within the header or within the line details, wherever you're looking to add that field. So I do not necessarily like working in through the personalized toolbar, but you can work that way. Options, personalize this page. Right clicks work much better. Working with the enhanced list grid, I would recommend working that way. I've got about 10 minutes left, and I've got 4 things I want to cover that we need to troubleshoot that have been issues for individuals over the last 5 months or 4 months or so. So I can circle back if users have questions on how to add data fields, be it to the header or the line details. I can work with you guys to answer those questions. I'm going to jump back to all purchase orders, and a common issue that gets raised is when I use my filter box, I'm not getting the search results that I want. So I'm just going to pick a view here. And let's say I come up here and I want to search for a specific purchase order. Print something. I want to search for a specific purchase order. If I don't hit enter, so I wasn't quick enough, but a lot of people will key in their purchase order and they'll hit enter and something will come up. I'm searching for PO 270. It's going to think for a second, hopefully. And it comes back and it says, we can't find anything. We can't find the purchase order you're looking for. If you come back up to your filter box and you start to enter what you're looking to find and you don't hit enter, it's going to allow this drop-down menu to populate and show up. 99% of the time, if you can't get results that you want from this filter box, it's because somehow a different column has been selected than what you're looking for. So in this case, I'm searching for PO 270541, but it's searching for it in the vendor account. You're never going to find it there. So you have to come back down, click purchase order. Hopefully there's a 270541. Probably take a second to look for it. But you can see I'm now on the purchase order itself. So keep that in mind if you're searching for purchase order using the filter box. If it's not in purchase orders, if you're somewhere else searching the filter box and you're having issues, please make sure you check to make sure where you're doing. So also a thing to note, this is what they call implicit personalization. So if you choose purchase order, it's going to stick with purchase order. It should stick. Now, it may get bumped off of purchase order, but 95% of the time, 99% of the time, it's going to stay on the one that you select. That's an implicit personalization. So if you select purchase order, it's going to stay on that. Let's say you were searching for a vendor and you selected vendor account, but then you come back later and you want to search purchase order, but you don't select purchase order, it's still going to search vendor account. This is not something you have to save through your view. Whatever you select in this drop-down menu, it's going to keep that for your all purchase orders view. So the other thing I want to quickly cover is when we're adding procurement categories to forms or to a purchase order or even a purchase requisition. So if you're like me, you probably use the same 80% of your purchase orders might have procurement categories that you already know and you want to type in. That can work the majority of the time, but some users, or I should say users, have encountered errors at points where it doesn't recognize the procurement category. So for instance, if you order apparel, you might do shirts and blouses. So I type in shirts and blouses. You can see if I don't hit enter, it performs a search for me. It takes shirts and blouses, it populates it here, and it puts an asterisk next to it, which it says, what the asterisk is saying is search shirts and blouses or anything close to it. Because I know that shirts and blouses is a procurement category, it's gone and found it, and I can click OK. Sometimes when I click shirts or when I type in shirts and blouses and I try to get off the procurement category, I'll get an error. D365 isn't going to give me the error today, and we won't waste any time looking for it. If you get that error where it's saying item or category is not found, if you get that error, it's because you typed it in, you copied and pasted your procurement category in, and it's not recognizing it. To get away from that error, don't enter anything into the procurement category. Click your down arrow, come to your filter box. If you know the specific one, you can enter it, but I'm just going to do shirts. Make sure you use your asterisk, which is your wild card for your search. Actually select shirts and blouses and hit OK. That's going to get rid of that error message for you. Okay. So it can be an inconvenience, but if you're catching that error, that is the way to get around that error, is to actually use the drop down arrow before you enter in any information into that procurement category. Okay, I guess I thought I had, oh, I do have three, but four. The last thing I want to cover, so when you guys log help desk tickets with us, it is really helpful for you to give us as much possible information that it can be. You're probably sick of me asking you, are you using Google Chrome? Have you reset your browser history? Can you log out and log back in? Send me a screenshot of the whole page. It's just all that information is very useful for us to help kind of understand what may or may not be going on. If you think you're encountering an error, a true error within the system, one other thing that we would like to see from you when you submit your help desk ticket is called the session information. So any page that you're on, I came back to home page, but you could be working in your purchase order when you get your error. What we would like you to do, or what we'd ask you to do, is to come up to this smiley face in the upper right-hand corner and click on it. And you see right here is what it is, session information. So we don't want you to submit it. Don't submit feedback right here within D365. But if you can copy and paste this information into your tech desk ticket, it is helpful for us when we are working with our implementation partners and with Microsoft in trying to help diagnose the issue and the error that you're receiving. So please keep that in mind if you're filing a ticket. Uh, Screenshots are our best friend. They really help us out. And then if it's not necessarily an inquiry as to maybe how to do something in DAX, or something is unique, but um, it may not come across as a system error, this may not be necessary. But if you want to err on the side of caution, grab this session information, include it in the tech desk ticket. That'd be really helpful for us.
And Kyle, just one quick note on that too. If you do get an error screen, excuse me, that pops up in the middle of your D365 window, it's not automatically expanded, but this session information is actually located at the bottom of that error message as well. And so, like Kyle said, that's really the point when we need it. If you're just asking a how-to question or need help navigating, those types of things. But if you see an error, grab that session information for us. It's super helpful.
So, Cheryl, the last thing that I had on my list was just to share with folks on the where our training materials are within 360 within the SharePoint site. However, I am not VDI'd in, so I can't show anything. But
Okay.
we can share as a follow up with additional, with a link again. It's all, if we share that link, when you hit that page, there is not training for every single process that we do in D365. It just wasn't possible for us to get that. But for the main topics, the main processes that we do, Marnie Hall has put together phenomenal videos. So I honestly would say start there with her videos on whatever topic or module that you may be interested in or have questions on, and then use the presentations to support her videos.
Yeah, and when this session was recorded, so I will send out the link for this recording to all D365 users. And when we do that, we'll go ahead and include that D365 user site address as well. All right, and Kyle, you said that was that's the end of your presentation?
Yep. Like I said, I skimmed over adding data fields. So, and that may be a slightly bit more nuanced. So again, if any users have questions, if you're trying to add fields, or you're trying to move or rearrange fields, you can log a tech desk ticket, and we'll get you guys all squared away.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kyle. You did a great job. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now. Just for your reference, we do hope to do these